the dark, cold streets of Calgary during the 1970s, 4 young women vanished under chilling circumstances. It would take over 40 years for their families to finally get answers. This is the story of Ava Violet Dvorak, Patricia Marie McQueen, Melissa Ann Rehorek, and Barbara Jean McLean, whose lives were tragically cut short by a brutal serial killer whose crimes went unsolved for decades. Each of these young women met a tragic and violent end. Ava and Patricia's bodies were discovered in a wooded area, their deaths initially classified as sudden but suspicious. Melissa and Barbara were both found strangled, their bodies bearing marks of a fierce struggle. Despite the immediate response from law enforcement, the lack of advanced forensic technology at the time left investigators with few leads, and the cases grew cold. Ava was a typical teenager, full of life and excitement. Born on September 2, 1961, she was the youngest of 11 children in a loving family. Ava loved music, sports, and playing pranks on her siblings. Her adventurous spirit and independent nature were evident even at a young age. She often went swimming or roller skating with her sisters and cousins, and had a big circle of friends for a girl her age. Ava was 14 years old and an 8th grade student at Ian Bazalgette Junior High School in Calgary. Ava Violet Dvorak and Patricia Marie McQueen were inseparable friends, both just 14 years old. Patsy, as Patricia was affectionately called, was born into a big family with 10 siblings, 6 sisters, and 4 brothers. Patsy loved baseball and, like any teen, was into music and dancing. She had a great sense of humor and loved to play pranks. She always talked about traveling, saying she could not wait to grow up and see the world. On February 15, 1976, Ava and Patricia disappeared under mysterious circumstances, leaving their families devastated and desperate for answers. The day started ordinarily for the 2 girls, who were known for their lively personalities and love for adventure. However, it soon took a tragic turn that would haunt their families for decades. Ava Dvorak and Patty McQueen left their classes and spent time at their friends' homes. They planned to party over the weekend but failed to return or contact their families, causing concern. Their parents reported them missing, prompting an investigation. Interviews with classmates revealed the girls' involvement in minor substance use, mainly marijuana and some chemicals, but no hardcore drugs. The girls were last seen alive in Calgary, and their sudden disappearance sparked immediate concern. Despite extensive searches and widespread media coverage, the bodies of Ava and Patricia were discovered under an overpass near Calgary. The exact circumstances of their deaths remained unclear, with the medical examiner unable to determine the precise cause. The lack of conclusive evidence led to their deaths being initially classified as sudden but suspicious. The girls were found fully clothed, without obvious signs of assault. Despite extensive investigations, no illegal substances were detected, and the cause of death was determined to be asphyxia, suggesting they simply stopped breathing. The autopsy revealed no significant findings to explain their deaths, leading to a classification of sudden but suspicious deaths. A newspaper article 6 weeks later painted the girls in a negative light, suggesting they willingly took illegal substances and had alcohol on their breath. The article alleged they had been asked to leave school early on Friday due to this. It portrayed them as party hoppers, staying with friends, drinking, and using drugs. However, these were minors incapable of fully understanding the consequences of their actions, and their deaths remained a grim mystery. Melissa Ann Rehorek, a 20-year-old housekeeper, had recently moved to Calgary from Ontario in the spring of 1976. Known for her adventurous spirit and positive outlook, Melissa quickly adapted to her new environment. On the evening of September 15, 1976, Melissa was last seen by her roommate, expressing her intention to hitchhike out of the city during her days off. Dressed up in a blue denim jacket, skirt, and a red blouse, she left around 8:30 p.m., possibly dropped off near Highway 1 in the Bowness area. The next day, a hiker discovered Melissa's body in a ditch 22 kilometers west of Calgary. She had been asphyxiated and suffered a blow to the head. Long black hair strands found in her hand suggested a struggle. Despite extensive investigations, the hair did not lead to a suspect, and her case went cold. The DNA analysis in the 1990s failed to identify the assailant due to the lack of a national database at the time. Barbara Jean McLean, a 19-year-old bank employee, had moved to Calgary from Nova Scotia just 6 months before her untimely death. Barbara had left the town of Innis, Nova Scotia, seeking better opportunities. There she lived with her brothers. Homesick, Barbara planned a visit home in early March and even considered college. On the night of February 25, 1977, Barbara joined friends at the Highlander Hotel bar for an evening out. She had argued with her boyfriend and decided to hitchhike home. She was last seen walking alone from the hotel in the early hours of February 26th. Her body was discovered several hours later by a dog walker in the area of 6th Street and 80th Avenue NE, Calgary. Barbara's body bore signs of a violent struggle, with numerous marks and bruises, and she had been strangled. Investigators believed that she had fought back against her attacker, as evidenced by the blood found on her left hand and foreign hairs on her body. Despite extensive efforts, including interviewing hundreds of taxi drivers and collecting hair samples from over 600 men, the case grew cold with no significant leads. The immediate response from law enforcement included thorough searches and interviews with potential witnesses. However, the lack of advanced forensic technology at the time severely hindered the investigation. Despite collecting crucial evidence, including seminal fluid from the crime scenes, the inability to develop a DNA profile left investigators with few actionable leads. The families of Eva, Patricia, Melissa, and Barbara were left in anguish, grappling with the devastating loss of their loved ones and the uncertainty surrounding their deaths. For decades, these cases remained unsolved, casting a long shadow over the community and leaving a lasting impact on the victims' families. Seminal fluid had been found at the crime scenes of Melissa Ann Rork and Barbara Jean McLean, but the technology to develop a DNA profile did not exist at the time. Consequently, these cases went cold, leaving the families and the community in a state of prolonged anguish. The turning point came in the early 2000s with significant advancements in DNA analysis. In 2003, enhanced DNA technology enabled investigators to confirm that the same suspect was linked to both Melissa Rork and Barbara McLean's murders. However, despite this breakthrough, the DNA profile did not match any entries in the National DNA Databank, and the suspect remained unidentified, referred to only as Individual A. In 2021, the Alberta RCMP and Calgary Police Service decided to employ a relatively new tool in criminal investigations: Investigative Genetic Genealogy, IgG. This technique involves using genetic information from distant relatives to build a family tree that can help identify potential suspects. The DNA profile developed from the crime scene evidence was uploaded to GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, two databases used for genetic genealogy. Investigators re-examined the evidence collected from the crime scenes of Eva Dvorak, Patricia McQueen, Melissa Rork, and Barbara McLean. With the assistance of Parabon Nanolabs this time, a comprehensive genetic profile was created from the DNA evidence. Genealogists then began the painstaking task of building a family tree from this profile, identifying potential relatives of the unknown suspect. The genetic genealogy analysis pointed to Gary Allen Sereri, a U.S. citizen with a history of violent offenses, as a potential match. Sereri had an extensive criminal record, including convictions for rape, kidnapping, and other violent crimes. He had illegally entered Canada in the mid-1970s and lived under various aliases. Sereri was deported to the U.S. in 2003 and died in an Idaho prison in 2011 while serving a sentence for rape. To confirm Sereri's involvement, RCMP investigators, with assistance from the Idaho State Police Forensic Services and Interpol, compared his DNA to the profiles developed from the crime scenes. The match was conclusive. Gary Allen Sreri's DNA was present on all 4 victims, confirming him as the perpetrator of the murders of Ava Dvorak, Patricia McQueen, Melissa Rehorek, and Barbara McLean. Sreri was born in 1942 and grew up in Illinois before moving to California in the mid-1950s. His early life was marked by instability and a propensity for violence. By the time he reached adulthood, he had developed a criminal record that would foreshadow the horrors he would later commit. Sreri's criminal history began with petty thefts, but quickly escalated to more violent crimes. In 1965, he was arrested in Los Angeles for a violent sexual assault and was subsequently convicted of sexual assault by force and kidnapping. His time in prison, including stints in San Quentin, did little to rehabilitate him. Instead, Sreri continued his violent behavior, living a transient lifestyle and using numerous aliases to evade law enforcement. Sreri's ability to evade capture was aided by his frequent changes in appearance, residence, and even identity. After posting bail for a rape charge in California in the early 1970s, he fled to Canada, where he lived illegally under various names, including Willie Blackman and Rex Long. During his time in Canada, Sreri worked sporadically as a cook and manual laborer, often relying on welfare and other under-the-table jobs to support himself. From 1976 to 1977, Sreri was living in Calgary, Alberta, where he committed the brutal murders of Ava Dvorak, Patricia McQueen, Melissa Rehorek, and Barbara McLean. His ability to blend into the background and the lack of advanced forensic technology at the time allowed him to continue his criminal activities unchecked. Sreri's violent tendencies and manipulative behavior made him a dangerous predator, capable of committing heinous acts without remorse. In 1998, Sreri was arrested in New Westminster, British Columbia, for an assault, marking one of the few times he had significant contact with law enforcement in Canada. His arrest and subsequent conviction led to his deportation to the United States in 2003. Despite his criminal history, Sreri managed to live under the radar until his final arrest, which resulted in a prison sentence for rape. He died in 2011 while serving time in an Idaho prison. Gary Allen Sreri's name became synonymous with terror when his connection to the murders of Ava Dvorak, Patricia McQueen, Melissa Rehorek, and Barbara McLean was finally uncovered. His identification as a killer brought a mixture of relief and sorrow to the families of Ava, Patricia, Melissa, and Barbara. The families had endured decades of uncertainty, haunted by the loss of their loved ones and the lack of answers. The confirmation of Sreri as the killer provided long-awaited closure, but it also reopened old wounds as they confronted the brutal reality of the crimes once more. Nonetheless, they expressed gratitude to the dedicated investigators who never gave up on the case. They hoped that their story would inspire other families with unresolved cases to hold on to hope. They also called for ongoing support for forensic advancements, stressing that the relentless pursuit of justice can eventually bring closure and peace. The community, too, was affected by the news. The knowledge that such a violent individual had lived among them, committing horrific acts, was a sobering reminder of the dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of everyday life. The successful resolution of these cold cases underscored the power of modern forensic techniques, particularly investigative genetic genealogy, IgG, as it set a precedent for the use of IgG in solving other cold cases, demonstrating how combining traditional investigative methods with cutting-edge technology can yield results even after many years. Nearly half a century after the first investigations began, the RCMP uncovered the truth for the surviving loved ones of the victims. While the unmasking of Gary Allen Sreri cannot undo the pain and loss experienced by the victims' families, it does provide a sense of closure and underscores the vital role of modern technology in solving cold cases. The families of the victims thanked the authorities for their efforts, expressing relief and sorrow as they finally confronted the brutal reality of the crimes. The story of Ava Violet Dvorak, Patricia Marie McQueen, Melissa Ann Rehorek, and Barbara Jean McLean is a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring impact of violent crime. Their tragic deaths left an indelible mark on their families and the community. But their legacy also includes the tireless efforts of investigators who never gave up on finding the truth, and the advancements in forensic science that ultimately brought a killer to justice. If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated about the latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of cold cases.